Good morning and welcome to Rising. Happy Thursday. Our show today is just fine and dandy, and we can't wait to tell you all about it. Let's get started, Jess.
Yes, we are going to tee things off today with the latest on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The independent presidential candidate seems to be doing a little bit of networking. He sought a meeting with Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris to discuss the possibility of serving in her administration in exchange for an endorsement from Kennedy, according to the Washington Post. Reports say the Kennedy team floated the position of cabinet secretary. Kennedy wrote in a text message last night, quote, "We've reached out repeatedly through the highest level intermediaries. We've been told that they have no interest in talking with me," according to the New York Times.
Kennedy told the Washington Post that he thinks Harris is making a mistake in not meeting with him. "I think it's a strategic mistake for them," he said. "That's my perspective. I think they ought to be looking at every opportunity. I think it's going to be a very close race." This comes just weeks after Kennedy and Republican nominee Donald Trump were in similar talks. Kennedy inquired about a role in advising Trump on health and medical issues in a possible second term, which resulted in no actual agreement. Now, the latest polling from 538 shows Kennedy at 5% nationally, with Harris at 46.2% and Trump at 43.6%. Kennedy is fighting a legal effort to keep him off of the ballot in New York after a Democratic group challenged the validity of the address he had listed relating to his petition. A New York judge recently ruled him ineligible to appear on that ballot. Now, Kennedy did get some good news, however, recently. He will likely appear on Maine's ballot in November after a hearing set to challenge his name on the ballot was canceled. Maine resident James Stretch filed a petition challenging Kennedy's spot on the ballot last week, but withdrew it without explanation. Because it was the only challenge brought against Kennedy in the state of Maine, the Secretary of State there, Shenna Bellows, canceled the hearing that was scheduled for this morning. Earlier this month, Bellows' office confirmed Kennedy had qualified for Maine's November general election ballot.
I really liked there was a spicy exchange with RFK Jr. and Sean Hannity on Fox News earlier in the week, where Hannity was asking, "Are you in this till Election Day?" And Bobby Kennedy said, "Yes. If Fox News lets me on the debate stage, I will win the election." And Hannity was like, "I don't make up the rules, but there are rules. You have to show X amount of polling." And he responded, Bobby Kennedy said, "They're making up the rules, Sean. If they had the presidential debate in commission, I would be on the stage." So things got a little heated, more than I think people were expecting on Fox News, but he's kind of right. He should be on the debate stage.
He should be on the debate stage regardless of if it's, if Fox is the venue, CNN's the venue, ABC, NBC, CBS, it doesn't matter. I agree. Absolutely, Kennedy should be on the debate stage. And when the mainstream media and the corporate media are trying to keep him out of the public eye, of course his poll numbers are going to go down. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're like, well, you don't have 15% or whatever you need to qualify under the Presidential Debate Commission rules, which is stupid and doesn't matter anyway because they threw out that rule book. They're not going by it. They're not. Biden and Trump were not following. They were not working with the debate commission, so it doesn't matter what the debate commission says. They could absolutely accept a lower polling threshold. But anyway, how's he supposed to get there if they're not giving him any time and attention and they're just singularly focused on the major candidates? Now, what did you make of his efforts to make an agreement with Kamala? I think this is politics. This is something that, in our winner-take-all system where it's very difficult for third-party and independent candidates to get anything, they don't get, if you get 5% or 10% share of the vote, in another system, in Britain, for instance, that means you get 5 or 10% of the representation in the government. Broadly speaking, that's how it works in other electoral systems. In our system, you get nothing unless you get 51% of the vote. So one of the only ways you can leverage your 5 or 10% is to make some kind of deal with one of the two leading candidates for their support and some role in the administration. That is one of the only ways to turn your level of support into tangible, actionable power and influence. So I think that's absolutely fine that he sought it from both Trump and Kamala, but it seems like nothing came of it.
I have a feeling Trump offered it the way that phone call sounded, right? When we heard the leaked audio, thanks to RFK Jr.'s son, I guess. Someone on the campaign was recording in that room and leaked it. It really sounded like Trump was groveling a little bit, like, "Oh, this would be so good for you, Bobby." It seemed like it was coming from Trump. But maybe Kennedy hadn't considered it yet. I mean, of course, that's going to come at some point in the race, whereas an independent candidate who's not polling in the amount that you would need to win 270 electoral college votes, you might say, okay, let's think about who I can drop out and endorse in exchange for a cabinet position. This would have been so smart for the Harris campaign. I think she's terrified of the liberals within the Democratic Party who would say RFK Jr. is a conspiracy theorist and he hates vaccines and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's kind of scary to me because I know people live in a bubble, and RFK Jr. has gone back on a lot of that and said, listen, I know it sounded like I was saying this, but this is actually what I meant. And it's just ridiculous to cling on to what the old version of what someone said was, which they definitely do with RFK Jr. I think that's where this is coming from. This would have been a smart political move. There's no other explanation for where this is coming from. They're terrified of the liberals that hate RFK Jr.
Oh, for sure. Can you imagine if she did offer him some role in the administration? Well, I don't know. Maybe there's nothing she can do that is going to actually generate some serious heat from the media because they're so in the tank for her. But if anything would cause a full media rebellion against Kamala Harris, it would be doing anything accommodating of RFK Jr. at all, right? The mainstream people would freak out. Maybe they wouldn't care because they're so pro Kamala. But you can imagine that being something because they've been just so thunderously anti RFK Jr. Right, talking about him, his conspiracy theorist, all of that. But really, I don't think there's much of a home anymore in the Democratic Party for someone like RFK Jr., who, while being very progressive and very much a Democrat on a lot of economic issues, a lot of environmental related issues, because of his views on vaccines, which I don't agree with him for the most part about the vaccines themselves. I absolutely agree they should not be required, and that a lot of this, the tyranny associated with COVID stuff is very bad. But I think that's a non-starter in the highest levels of the Democratic Party now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about just how liberal Democrats reacted. When some of them follow me, I don't know why, but when we talked about whether or not going to school was okay during the pandemic. And Emily Oster was an advisor in my graduate program, and I was following her collection of data. Even when the CDC wasn't doing it, she was doing it independently. And it showed that there wasn't a high spread in schools. And people, mostly of upper middle class families, were outraged because these are families that can afford a laptop, they can afford a webcam, they have stable Wi-Fi connection, so their kid can go to school from home. Working class families don't have the child care to supervise a child being at home, let alone have the technology necessary to facilitate that. So it could have been a scenario where, yeah, kids can still go to school, but we just put a Zoom stream up in the classroom. And if you want to be a bougie person and let your kid go to school at home because you're worried about the pandemic, you can do that. That could have been an option. But just for questioning it and saying, you know what, maybe it wasn't a good policy that we forced everyone to do school from home because of these resource issues among working class Americans. Liberal Democrats lost their minds. They were like, how could you be so evil? When it seems they haven't thought through the problem. And that's the kind of person I think the Harris campaign is calculating with this and saying, you know what, that we can't have him on the ticket. We can't have this endorsement. But that would have been so smart because think about the voters that would go for Trump that are currently going for RFK Jr. And if he made a case for Harris and said, I'm going to be in the administration, I'm going to fight for these ideals that you believe in, she would win a significant margin of votes that she's not getting right now.
I couldn't agree more. I really couldn't. Maybe this is going to be an agreeable day for us. We're off to a good start.
Who knows?
We're off to a really good start today, Jessica. More Rising right after this.